Hey everybody, thanks for joining in today. It's Justin here, grain farmer from just outside of Peterborough. Just get everybody a few minutes here to get logged in, and we'll get started here in a second. We had a bit of rain last night, so taking a break from the fields today. When it gets too muddy, it's just like driving through your lawn. Makes things pretty muddy and you might get stuck. So we're getting a bit of sunshine now. Here, first or second day of June. Planting, it's just about wrapped up, a little bit to finish up yet. We're making progress. Generally this time of year, farmers are pretty busy in the fields, getting the ground ready, planting, and trying to get their crop in for the year. Usually starts about April and usually carries us through till the end of May. For those who are just joining us now, thanks for tuning in. Welcome. Happy Local Food Week here outside of Peterborough, Ontario. And gonna take you through what I do here on a grain farm. So last night before the rain, got a little bit of planting in, so I'll show you guys the setup here, the planter and the tractor. The tractor, basically just like a car, you pull the planter behind it. The job of the planter is obviously to get seed in the ground, so it's a little bit more complicated than that. Obviously, it has to be precise, and you want to be able to make sure that the seed gets where you need it, and then also the fertilizer as well. So I'll give you a quick rundown on the planter here. So there's fertilizer tanks up front. So obviously growing crops every year requires some kind of nutrient, whether it be granular fertilizer or here I milk cows as well, so I have manure. To determine how much nutrient or fertilizer we need to apply, I soil test. So usually once every 3 years, I go and call my local input supplier and get them to come out and test the soil. So they take a probe, take some samples of the dirt, and then they come back with their results to see what kind of nutrients we have and we need to add to the soil to help the crops grow and to get better yielding crops and healthier growing crops too. So I'll show you guys here. This is from another farm of the family's, but I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of what the soil test might look like. So they probe the soil, and then they take all the different nutrient levels and show us where obviously the green are the good areas, and the red is where we need to improve and where we might need to add some nutrient to help the crops grow. Again, generally every 3 years we'll go through and take soil samples. You might make an amendment this year and might not see the results for a little while, but also the growing crop will typically use up some nutrients as well, so you want to see what's being depleted and what you need to build. Here I'm actually organic farming, so biggest difference is my nutrient sources. So there's regulations on what kind of fertilizer I can use, and so there's obviously specialists that go through and help find the nutrients that we need so that we can ensure that the crop remains certified organic. Again, on the front of the planter, those big boxes, those hold the fertilizer. So again, this is a corn planter. Most important for corn, I guess, would be nitrogen. And for me, I use manure to help build the nitrogen in the soil. Then behind it here, we have the corn seed boxes themselves. So very similar to if you go and pick up seed from the garden center. My seed comes in a bag. It's just a little bit bigger bag. So here you can see corn seed. Almost looks like corn you'd eat, but it's a lot harder. And it's dried down so that it doesn't sprout when it's in storage. So the planter uses the ground drives. Look out, pup. meters the seed and places it down into the soil. You can see there's these oh, sorry, we got dogs coming in for a little bit of a cameo. This is Bo. But yeah, so these disc openers cut the soil, drop the seed in, and then we have closing wheels behind that close it. And very similar to, again, if you're planting a garden, what you might do. So I'll pull the planter tractor ahead a little bit here, and then you can see what the result looks like, and then I'll take you out to the cornfield so we can check it out. There's some corn I planted a week ago that's already up and out of the ground, so we can see how it's doing. Just put the tractor into gear here and we'll pull ahead a little bit. So based on your soil type, based on what variety of corn you're growing, you can change the population and change the amount of fertilizer that you're putting down too. So again, having a good crop scout or crop advisor is key, because it's a lot to know. So you can see here, the planter is dropping the corn seed down, and then generally these closing wheels would have the dirt covered over top. We're just in the laneway here, so it's hard packed ground. And then the fertilizer is placed 2 inches down and 2 inches over typically. So you can see this white granular here. So that allows, so the corn, once it gets growing, develops some roots, the roots are encouraged to go over to that fertilizer, and it can take advantage of that. Yeah, so that's basically the job of the corn planter. You're pulling it through the field, you're just keeping an eye on things, making sure that it's running properly, and your seed and your fertilizer is going out at the proper rate. And yeah, I guess we should talk about seed too. Like as farmers, we have a complete control and choice over what we put in our field. So I choose to grow corn. Again, I mentioned I do have some dairy cows around, so I need some corn for the silage, but also I grow grain corn on top of that, and that gets sold to my local corn elevator. So it's basically a purchaser that comes, buys the corn from me, dries it, and then sells it to its end user. Here in Ontario, organic corn likely going to go into the feed market for other livestock. Other conventional corn, same thing. Livestock is a big purchaser in Ontario of our corn. Other crops that are common to grow here, corn, soybeans, and wheat is usually a common 3-year rotation. So say the first year we're going to grow corn. I'm going to plant it anywhere from April to June. Say the end of May, June. I'm going to harvest that in typically November. And it's going to be harvested when it's brown and dried down in the field. And that saves a little bit of drying cost, and also helps improve the storage quality of the corn. And then the next year, I'm going to plant soybeans in that field. Soybeans, again, usually planting end of April through May, sometimes into the early part of June. And then harvest those soybeans usually in October. We typically around Thanksgiving weekend, we're combining soybeans. Soybeans are really good. Corn is a big, tall, leafy plant. There's a lot of, say, natural material that gets to break down in the soil, helps build the organic matter in the soil. Soybeans have, I guess, some good benefits. They help fix nitrogen in the soil. So they grow, and then usually after I harvest soybeans in October, I'm going to plant wheat right after, and wheat requires a lot of nitrogen to grow. So again, it can take advantage of that nitrogen that the soybeans fixed and have it into its growing season. And then the wheat, yeah, you typically plant in October after your beans, and then you'd harvest the next August. Again, in Ontario, those are the 3 main crops that are grown, but there's also a host of others, depending on what you're growing them for. So again, based on your weather, based on your soil type, you're going to go through and choose the seed that's right for your farm, and also the variety, the heat, to make sure that you're going to grow the best crops possible. we're gonna walk over to the cornfield here now and take a look at what it looks like once it comes out of the ground. Yeah, so again, being an organic farm, I work the soil, make sure it's as clean as possible before planting so that I'm not going to have high weed pressures. And then through the growing season, I have to take steps other than spraying to help control the weeds. So typically I'm going to use a couple different tools that I'll show you to help keep the weeds down. And I probably should make another pass coming up here shortly, but we'll take a look. Just seen another question here asking about why it's important to rotate crops. So we want to make sure that again we're kind of building that say the biological life of the soil, and by having a diverse group of crops, it allows for I guess the insect and disease pressures that might target corn wouldn't target a soybean potentially. So it allows us to kind of hedge off some weed or insect pressures, but also helps again the diversity of the bacteria in the soil. So I'll switch around here. You can see the corn rows. The corn is just starting to come up out of the ground. This field planted probably a week and a half ago. Yeah, there's some grass weeds starting to come up, and there's plenty of stones. But yeah, we can actually dig up a corn plant here. It's yeah, pretty nice after the rain. Let's see if we can get down to it. Hey, Pop. Okay, sorry, we just got the dog getting in the way here. You can see the corn. It comes from that little seed that we pulled out of the planter. We should be able to dig the seed up here too. But yeah, there's what the corn plant looks like. I'll find maybe be a little gentler and find corn seed here. But yeah, the seed basically grows a root, goes down deep into the soil, and you can see it's kind of reached over to try and grab some of that fertilizer. And then yeah, the rain helps it grow. So here's another corn plant where you can still see the corn seed attached. I probably broke the other one off, but yeah, so typically this field, again, we're gonna probably see the most growth out of it in the next couple months here, and then towards the end of September, October, you're gonna see that corn start to turn brown and dry down in the field. You can have a look here in the field too. Move some stones out of the way, but you can see there's some young weeds starting to grow. So just the same way in a garden, yeah, the bare soil, the rain, the sunlight, everything is a great environment for the corn seed to grow, but it's also a great environment for weeds to grow too. So we have to constantly monitor that, and as well as monitoring for insect and disease pressures too, to make sure that we control it before it gets too out of control or too out of hand. We have another question here. What made you decide to be a grain farmer? So my family, we're originally from outside of Chatham, and I'm the fifth generation to farm on the ground down there. So yeah, I guess it's been in my family for a long time, and I kind of wanted to continue with that. But also it's I don't know, I find it's cool. You get to yeah, do a lot of work in the spring, get the ground fit, get the seed in the ground, and then in the fall you get to reap the rewards of all your hard work. So yeah, it works out pretty well. And here in Ontario, there's about 41,000 grain farming families, so it's a pretty big industry. And yeah, most of those are family farms, and it's passed down from generation to generation. But there's also young people getting into it as well. So it's pretty cool, and it's great to work with family too. Sometimes it can be a challenge, but overall it's worth it. Here's another question. What are the largest challenges you face? Is it weather related, commodity, or something else? So I'll answer that one first. Yeah, so there's only so much you can control. So I can control the fertility of my soil, the planting time, depth, but again, weather is something that's completely out of hand. And I guess markets too can sometimes be a challenge, which is actually part of the reason I decided to start organic farming. So, you know, I'm a relatively small acreage. We just run a couple hundred acres. But for me to sell those commodities on the general market, you know, it wouldn't really help make the mortgage payments on the farm. So I did some research and thought, you know, organic is a little bit extra work, but it's an opportunity for me as a small farmer to be able to grow. Yeah, so, you know, markets, commodity prices are a challenge, trade deals, it's, yeah, it keeps it interesting. But also weather is huge. So, yeah, there is some areas in Ontario that they do irrigate. So it's basically like a giant sprinkler that they throw over the field, to help bring water. Yeah, here I don't have access to that kind of water that I'd be able to irrigate with. And it's expensive. So, you know, if I have a dry year like last year, the crops went in really late because we had a really wet spring, and then we didn't get rain all summer after that. So, yeah, I'd say probably at least 50% a decrease in yield. So yeah, it was a difficult year, but again, it's all about managing and hoping that you have the right insurance in place to be able to get through times like that. Another question here. Where do you obtain your seeds? Do you need to purchase them, or can you harvest them? So you have the option to do either. Again, I guess it's kind of like a Sears catalog almost. You can go through whatever seed company you choose, get their catalog, so it goes through all the different seed varieties they have, again based on heat and what kind of crop you're growing and what area you're in, soil types, and then you can pick out which one you want from there. You can keep back some seed if you want to. It just depends what kind of crop you're growing. So yeah, if say for example I bought organic soybeans, I'd have the option to carry some seed over into the next year, as long as I'm not selling them off of my farm. The reason for some seeds you're not able to keep the seed is because there's a lot of money and research that goes into breeding that seed and bringing it to market. So say for example a seed that is tolerant to herbicide that a conventional farm might use, there's millions and millions and millions of dollars and probably close to 10 or 20 years in bringing that seed or that technology to market, and huge expense associated with that. So the company is just trying to recuperate that cost, and if you were to sell that seed or use it again, it's not going to support new technologies coming to market either. Do I require immigrant workers? No. So on my farm, I'm the main labor here. So yeah, a typical day, get up around 4 o'clock, milk cows, probably done chores around 6, and then I go to work for the day. So I work full time as well off farm to help pay it down. And then yeah, I get done work and go and milk cows again and do some more chores. So yeah, immigrant workers typically in Ontario we'd see on vegetable farms, greenhouse operations, where there's a lot of manual labor. And again, it's pretty nice to have the immigrant workers coming and having those programs because you know, they're hard workers, they're reliable, and they do a really good job. So I know I have some friends with immigrant workers and it works out really well for them, but here I'm able to do most of the labor myself. So yeah, it works out pretty well. Another question here, how does crop insurance work? So same, or I guess similar to how vehicle insurance might work. If you have an accident, you smash up your car, you call the insurance company, let them know what happened, and they're going to help you buy a new car or get back on your feet again. So crop insurance, it goes on an average yield. So they take an average of what my harvests are on the farm. and say, okay, this is typically what that farm can produce. And they would say, okay, if you had a bad year, again, due to weather or some other peril, then you can apply for crop insurance and say, hey, look, this year is pretty poor, I need help. And they, again, same as your car insurance would, they come, they do an inspection, and then you might get a payout to help. So again, it's key to have insurances, in my opinion, to help manage those bad years or the difficult times that, weather is something you can't control. I'll switch the camera here. This is a Tine Weeder. So it's basically a bunch of little spring-loaded tines that go through and disturb the soil. So you can see here it basically goes through, and remember those small weeds we were looking at? It'll come through and pick those right out of the soil. It's a bit more work to drive over the field, and there's potential for crop damage if it's not set up right, but it works pretty well. So I've already taken one pass with the Tine Weeder through that field. I might take another one here shortly when the ground dries up, and then after that I'm going to get into a cultivator. So I have again another piece of equipment here. Basically these knives go in between the corn rows and pick out or disturb any weed seed or weeds that are growing. So again, it's using a different set of tools to provide to that market that wants those organic crops. Typically, so I'll plant the corn. Within a couple days, I'm going to take the Tine Weeder through, and then a couple days, weeks, probably within the next month or month and a half, I'm going to take a couple passes with the cultivator. And then once the corn is big, it can kind of outcompete the weeds on its own. And then typically from then until harvest, it's just monitoring to make sure there's no other insect pressures. Sometimes we can get insects that get in, do damage to the corn. Sometimes birds can too. There's not much you can really do about the birds, but yeah, it's just monitoring to make sure the quality is going to be there when you go to harvest. Harvesting, this is an old combine. It still works, but yeah, basically you can see at the front here, it needs to be cleaned up, but it cuts the crops, and then this giant reel gathers them in and separates. So say corn, for example, it would take the kernels right off the cob. So if you remember back to the corn seed, it would look like that when it goes through the combine. Soybeans, it takes the bean out of the pod. Wheat, it takes the grain right out of the wheat head. So for our grain crops, we're gonna harvest those, and we want them to be dry, so they store well and they won't mold or go bad between us and the end user. So yeah, again, corn end users typically in Ontario or livestock market. There's also some like tortilla chips, corn chips, that sort of thing. Soybeans, a lot of our soybeans in Ontario are exported. So again, trade deals are huge. Something that we watch very closely because it could have a big impact on our price. But yeah, there are some domestic local uses for soybeans too. I know, one product is Wow Butter. So it's like a soybean peanut butter replacement, and that's made right here in Ontario. And then wheat, again, local uses, it might go into bread. I know there's cereal that's made right here in Ontario from our local wheat. So it just, it depends. The farmer has a choice to where they want to contract or market that crop to, and sometimes they might use marketing specialists to help find the end user. But yeah, there is a lot of, say, local grains that go into food that you'll see in the grocery store. And even, beyond food. So our corn crop, there's a big market for ethanol plants, for corn for ethanol. So they harvest the corn and they turn it into fuel. Basically commercial alcohols. And also, other products in the grocery store. It's endless if you were to look through and find, where that alcohol, the commercial alcohol made from corn might end up. Another question here, do you use a seed treatment? Why might a farmer use one, and what considerations do they make when using a seed treatment? So similar to how I scout my soil for for weed pressures, I'm looking for insect and disease pressures too. So typically, so again, on the organic farm side of things, I don't use a seed treatment, but on a conventional farm, it might make economic sense to. So it comes back to, again, having either the knowledge or having a really good crop advisor that you can rely on to go through the fields and scout for insects or disease pressures. And if you think there is going to be a problem, then you go start to count populations. So you want to find that say the economic thresholds. You want to make sure that if you're going to be spending money, and if you're going to be purchasing seed treatments, that there's a reason for it, and that the control that you're doing is going to come out to a net positive return for the farmer. So again, it comes down to financial respect, but also to environmental benefit too. So you want to make sure that you're not just using seed treatments because they're available. You're doing it because there's a documented need for it, and that using that treatment is going to help control it. Very similar to pesticides. So again, my background is in conventional farming. So at home, my family uses herbicide to help control weeds rather than working the ground to control them. So we're gonna scout the fields. We're gonna find out which weeds we have. We're gonna see that the population of that weed is of a point where it makes economic sense to control it. And then we're gonna find the right product, either through research or again through a crop advisor, to know what we're gonna spray. Every farmer in Ontario, if they are going to purchase pesticides, they have to take a pesticide safety course, which trains you on how to scout for the weed pressures, which chemicals to use, and safe handling and safe application. It's very little amount of chemical that's actually applied compared to the amount of water that they use to carry and spray on the fields. And usually it's a pretty effective and pretty economical way to control weeds. Again, on the organic side of things, probably one of my biggest challenges with getting grain to market is weed control. So not only my family at home being able to use pesticides reduces the amount of labor they're putting on the farm, but also saves fuel, and I think there's a benefit to both sides. It just depends what the end user or the consumer is looking for. I don't know what else is interesting or I can go over while we're here. It's again springtime. Usually people are pretty busy out in the fields getting the soil ready, planting, and then controlling weeds or controlling pests. So it's really good that with Local Food Week here, we were able to celebrate or show you a little bit what I do here on my farm. And also I think it's nice to know that a lot of the work and a lot of the grains that we produce here in Ontario and on our local grain farms are actually getting used and consumed in the province. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. Really appreciate you tuning in, and happy Local Food Week.